So what I did here in this first table is break down all of the level 4 practices by domain, and then kind of show, are these procedural and policy type practices where you have to put a policy in place, write a procedure, write a document that says, hey, this is how we're going to do something, and then disperse that out among your organization? Or is this something where we have to go actually build and implement a technical solution to technically enforce this requirement? Right.
Gotcha.
And so that's what you see here on the screen. With access control, there's one of the practices that's more policy procedural related, and then there's two of them that are more technical related. There are some of these, and I did not show them in both columns, but there are some of these that actually require a policy or a procedure and a technical implementation. And if in that case, most of those I put in the technical column, and we just kind of let the policy procedure kind of hang out there.
Yeah.
So I really only call out the policy and procedure ones if they are specifically, there's not a technical implementation component for the most part. It's really pretty much all policy that just has to be put in place. So as we go through these, I'm not going to talk about what it would take to build the policy. What I'm going to talk, for the ones that are policy and procedure related, I'm basically not going to talk about those when we get into technical implementation. I'm only going to talk about those that have a technical requirement to implement. So that's kind of how this is going to be laid out.
So it looks like there's 6 domains that do not have level 4 requirements.
That's right.
So like recovery, I think, is a good example.
That's
that
right.
has a level 5 requirement.
That's exactly right.
That you'll get to later, but doesn't have a level 4 requirement.
Yeah, so there's like you said, there's 6 that don't have a level 4 requirement, and then there's even fewer domains when we get down to level 5. Right?
I can
Not
imagine.
every domain has a level 5 requirement either, but recovery is actually the one that has a level 5 but doesn't have a level 4, which is relatively unusual, but that's the way recovery is set up. So.
Gotcha.
Okay, so with that as an overview, let's go ahead and jump down, and we'll just kick it off right here, at the top with access control. So there's 3 level 4 requirements in access control: .023, 25, and 032. The first one being, control information flows between security domains on connected systems. So this is a combination of a procedural and technical requirement. So you have to identify and document how you're going to do this, but then the technical implementation is for you to be able to identify if you have systems that you're building essentially enclaves, where you're going to try and have a CUI enclave separated from your non-CUI environment, and you implement a network like that. You have to make sure that you build out the policy and procedure around that, but also the actual configuration of the networks and such to control the flow of that CUI. So when we get to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about specific ways to do that. With AC.4.025, periodically reviewing and updating CUI program access permissions, this is really about a specific procedural requirement. So this is making sure that you maintain a log of everybody who has access to controlled unclassified information, who has the ability to read and write that content, and then making sure that you review that on a regular basis to ensure that your access control lists technically match up with your policy, with the actual log that you have. So we want to make sure that we know who should have access to controlled unclassified information in your organization. So this is taking it up from just having an access control list to actually getting specific approval on a user by user basis for getting access to content.
Okay.
And then finally on the AC side is .032, restricting remote network access based on organizationally defined risk factors such as time of day, location access, physical location, network connection state, measured properties of the current user and role. So what this is really about is implementing what we call conditional access policies. So the ability to control where someone is connecting from, what kind of device they're connecting from. Maybe you don't want people connecting from their home to your environment. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't want people connecting from outside the United States into your environment. And so you can set those kinds of controls in place. You can do those on your collaboration system. You can do those on your network systems with VPNs and those kind of things. It just kind of depends on what all systems are at play. So if you go to the next slide, these are really the two that I want to talk about from a technical implementation standpoint, which is .23 and .032. The first one, controlling the information flow. How can we implement that? So, completely building new networks or collaborative solutions, you can implement it that way. You can essentially build a brand new enclave, and we have a number of customers who have come to us and basically want to build a CUI enclave. And so they end up building, an Office 365 GCC High environment with an Azure environment, and they put VDI in place, virtual desktop infrastructure in place, and they are basically building a wholly controlled, identity management system with Active Directory, collaboration system, email, everything, all solely contained within this enclave, completely separate from their commercial environment, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is we're talking about building a completely new network or collaborative solution. And then the second way that you can do it is implementing something like Azure Information Protection. If you have an integrated environment, you can implement, something like an Azure Information Protection environment that allows you to encrypt and control by policy how CUI flows across those borders. And so, that is an approach to helping you, work to meet .2.3. On .3.2, restricting network access, this is a really easy one from an Office 365 standpoint and an Azure standpoint because they have a very strong conditional access policy capability built into Azure Gov and Office 365, okay? So this is something that we rely on heavily as we are configuring our environments, to use those conditional access policies. Outside of Azure Gov and Office 365, there are lots of solutions out there that can do similar capabilities. Some of them are integrated or portions of firewall deployment. Some of them are proxy services, identity management solutions, and there are others as well. But outside of the Office 365 GCC High and Azure Gov platform, you would have to integrate these solutions based on whatever other needs you have in your IT environment.
So, question coming in specifically on the conditional access policy piece of this. So, as far as like a best practice, what are some conditions that we would, in a standard scenario for most of our clients, implement? As kind of a best practice.
Sure. So
some things that kind of tease that out a little bit.
Sure. So for one that we see a lot is making sure that only enrolled devices can connect to the environment. So we don't want people to connect to our environment with, say, their home computer. Right. We want to make sure that only enrolled devices that we know meet all the security parameters and have all the security controls on those devices, be it a mobile device, iOS or Android, or a Windows 10, laptop. We want to make sure that it is a controlled device that has been enrolled in the environment before it connects.
Gotcha.
For some of our ITAR, EAR export control customers, they really look at the export control data very hard, and so anytime someone travels outside the United States, we basically shut down that access.
Okay.
Right. So those are some examples. Okay, so with asset management, onto the next domain here. Asset management only has one practice, and that is to employ a capability to discover and identify systems with specific component attributes. And what this is really trying to do is make sure that you understand what hardware is in your environment. You may want to make sure that you understand the firmware versions, OS versions, patch levels, what kind of hardware you have, such that if a vulnerability comes out that's attacking a specific firmware version of a laptop or a specific firmware version of or a specific patch level of an operating system, that you have the ability to go to an asset management system, identify all of your equipment that has that, and quickly go patch it and remove that vulnerability. Right? And so if you don't know what you have in your environment, it's very difficult for you to go out and quickly identify the vulnerabilities that you have in your platforms and fix those, right? And so this is all about putting in an asset management system so you know what you have. And so the fix here is really to implement an IT asset management system. If you go to the next slide, we're going to talk. We have the ability to for non-Office 365 or Intune mobile device solutions, you're looking at either implementing a full IT asset management solution or a remote monitoring and management solution that has the ability to run custom scripts to pull this information out of your laptops, your desktops, your network devices. And you can see some examples here. ServiceNow, Spiceworks, ConnectWise Automate, Kaseya, SolarWinds. These are different IT asset management and remote monitoring management solutions that various customers of ours use to allow them to pull this information in. We use some of these, in our managed services offering, so that we can have an asset management solution for our customers, so they know what they have, right? Now that's for network devices and non-Windows devices. On the Windows side and the mobile device side, we have the mobile device management capabilities of Intune. Intune can actually reach out and pull this information through its deployment to document your mobile devices, so iOS, Samsung Knox, Android, etc., Windows 10 devices, and can even pull information on some Mac devices. Right? We're not able to pull currently Linux information, so that would be something that you would pull, with another remote monitoring and management solution. But with Windows 10 and Mac and iOS and Samsung, we have the ability to pull all of this content in via Intune, as well. So that's another way to leverage that investment that you have. For audit and accountability, we've got two practices here, AU.4.053 and .054. Automating the analysis of audit logs to identify and act on critical indicators, or TTPs. TTP stands for technique, tactic, and procedure, for organizationally defined suspicious activity, and then reviewing that audit information for broad activity in addition to individual machine activity. And so here we're going to really be leveraging our SIM solution that we put in. One of the requirements that we had in level 3 that went beyond NIST Standard 171 was to implement a SIM solution, right? And throughout a number of these practices, as we get into level 4 and level 5, we're going to be leveraging that SIM solution heavily, right? So we want to configure that SIM solution using playbooks and runbooks and scripts to find these different indicators of attack, these different TTPs that are being identified, and other suspicious activity, so that we know that that's out there and that we can go either mitigate the potential effects of it, or we can go just straight up fix the vulnerability if something's found, right?
And this is active management.
Well, right. It's the analysis of the logs. It's an active process, right? And it's something that has to happen all the time, right? And so with .54, where that's a little bit different. So instead of, whereas in .53 we may be looking at individual machines, individual IP addresses, and the logs coming off of those. At .54, we're trying to back off a little bit, go to the 5,000 foot view a little bit and see where, okay, maybe 10 of my machines have been hit with this kind of technique, and what am I going to do to now mitigate that across my entire network rather than just mitigating it on a single server, right? So we want to use the run books, the playbooks, scripts to look for broadly suspicious activity, as well as the individual specific that you may see on any individual server. So with the next slide, we're going to we can talk some specifically about how we might integrate or how we might deploy this. You can see here, I didn't really specify out for each individual requirement here, because it's really the same requirement. It's just at what level. Are we doing individually, or are we doing it at a broader basis? So we want to leverage that SIM solution. We want to build those run books and those playbooks, build them out, customize them. The customization is really important, and I'll talk about customization here in a little bit, but the customization is really important because the more you customize, the more you are going to be able to find things that maybe an attacker wasn't expecting you to find. Right. Versus using just straight everything out of the box, because our attackers know what these products can do out of the box, and they can modify their TTPs so that what they're doing does not get flagged as easily, right? And so the customizations are really important. Obviously, and many of you, if you've been working with us, that our preferred solution is Azure Sentinel and Azure Government as our SIM solution. There are lots of other great SIM solutions out there: Alien Vault, Splunk, Logarithm, FireEye, Rapid7. There are there's lots of them out there. One thing that I would make sure that if you're going to go on and use on any of these other SIM solutions, ensure that you're getting the solution that is FedRAMP and is configured to CMMC standards. because a lot of these are out there and they're not built necessarily in FedRAMP compliant data centers, or they may not be configured to CMMC standards. So you got to make sure that both of those are covered as well. But there are lots of great SIM solutions out there.
One of the questions coming in is, does this necessitate a SOC?
Well, we're going to talk a lot about SOCs here
right.
in a few minutes.
Good.
Yes, level 4 does necessitate a SOC.
Okay.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We're going to have a SOC, or internally or third party, one way or the other.
Gotcha.
Okay, the next one is awareness and training. So AT 4.059 and .060. So this is all about providing training that goes above and beyond the requirements that we had in level 3, right? We want to make sure that we are responding to the different types of threats that are out there, APTs, social engineering attacks, breaches that have happened, other kinds of suspicious either system behaviors or user behaviors, and get that training about all those kinds of attacks out to your users. Okay, make sure that when you're training your people, you train them on individual potential problems, and then as you train them and train your people on those problems, you update your annual awareness training to include that information, so that everybody gets it at least once a year, but they get specified things throughout the year, right? And then .60 is all about practical exercises. So instead of just sending sitting people down and running them through death by PowerPoint, we need to actually have some practical exercises so that they experience these things. There's tool sets out there that allow you to do this, so that you can actually run your people through without them really knowing that it's coming. You can test them on phishing attacks, on malware attacks, on social engineering attacks, and you can test them on these things. And it's not to play gotcha. What it's to do is to understand what their responses are, see what their responses are, and then that allows you to go back and out and retrain them and say, okay, this is what happened, this is what you did, this is why we need to modify that response, and here's how you can do it better. And through repetition of doing that, your team, your employees over time are going to get better at responding to these attacks so that they don't get hit and they don't take the bait. Especially with the phishing attacks and those kinds of things, because the phishing attacks are killing people right now. I mean, there's all kinds of information and money being lost by companies because of phishing attacks right now.
Yeah, and it's really good when it can get indoctrinated into employees' minds that it's okay to come to IT with, hey, I goofed. Hey, I opened this up. And by doing these exercises, it kind of alleviates some of that stigma that, if I messed up and I did something wrong, oh gosh, I'm going to be fired. No, IT's regularly testing these things. They want me to come to them and say, hey, I messed up. Now, clearly, obviously, all the IT leaders on the webinar today, they don't want their users to open up bad emails. But nevertheless, kind of getting in the mindset of every employee is a part of this effort, and that it's okay to come to IT saying, hey, I don't know what this email is. I don't know what this attachment is. Hey, I messed up. I opened this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a zero defect culture doesn't work. It fails because people are scared, right? So you have to be open to that failure, but you have to be open to retraining.
Right.
Bad news does not get better with time. The longer that you've let a phishing attempt, that you fell for, sit out there, that's more damage that could be done in the environment. So getting that information known quickly is very, very good. So specifically with .60, the practical exercise piece, Office 365 has built into it what's called the ATP Attack Simulator. We use it internally quite a bit to simulate, phishing attacks and password attacks in our environments. There are other solutions for doing this outside of Office 365, because obviously Office 365 isn't the only thing you have, right? Any customer is going to have more than that, and so there are other solutions out there. Some of the big ones that many people have heard of before, Threat Cop. There are lots of others out there that integrate training along with simulator capabilities, so that you can actually test out your employees and how they respond, get the feedback in a report that you can then use to improve your training efforts. So it's really good. All right, so configuration management. CM 4.073 has both a procedural and a technical requirement built into it. So we want to make sure that we're doing whitelisting here. So employing application whitelisting and an application vetting process for systems identified by the organization. So we want to make sure that we have a vetting process built in for whitelisting. So in the .3, we were talking about blacklisting, right? So whitelisting is quite a bit more difficult than blacklisting. It's really easy to say, okay, we don't want these 5 applications to run in our environment. It's a lot harder to say, okay, these are the 60 applications in our environment that are authorized to run, and anything but these 60 can't run at all, because you don't necessarily, at least historically, companies haven't known every application that's run in their environment, right? Yeah. You have, lots of people with administrative privileges to their laptops, desktops. They're going out, downloading software, running it, and IT doesn't know anything about it. You go out and do an asset management, an asset discovery using, an RMM tool or an IT asset management solution, and you're going to find, some people have, 150 applications loaded on their laptop, and other people only have 20. And so there's a huge variety out there. And so really nailing down, what applications have to be there and are approved to run with a whitelist is really difficult. So there are solutions out there to allow you to do whitelisting, and I call some of those out here on this next slide. With Windows 10, OS X, your mobile devices, iOS and Android, we can leverage Intune to actually build this whitelist. And so we can say, okay, only these applications are approved to run on our Windows 10 devices, on our OS X devices, on our mobile devices. With Windows Server, we look at leveraging security policies and the native whitelisting capabilities built in there. That doesn't stop us from having to figure out the policy and process piece of it, right. But just the technical implementation piece of it, we can leverage those security policies, group policy, the whitelisting capabilities in that. When you get into Linux capabilities or Linux requirements, there are lots of applications out there that can help you do this. Beyond Trust, AppArmor, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, McAfee has a solution, to do this. But you have to build the whitelist, and you're going to have to have a whitelist for Macs and a whitelist for Windows and a whitelist for Windows Server and a whitelist for Linux. So this specific configuration management requirement is really, really significant. It's one that's going to take a lot of time to really nail down. So on incident response, there's a lot of incident response in level 4 and level 5. It's really, I almost want to call it the core of what's in level 4 and level 5, or some of the incident response requirements. Really using, like it says here in 100, using the knowledge of tactics, techniques, and procedures in incident response planning and execution. So, go out and find this information that the ISACs are making available, the information sharing and analysis centers, what the ISACs are making available. There's lots of different ISACs out there. There's lots of other providers out there that are giving information on how attackers are coming in and attacking systems today. Bring that information in, learn from it, and use it to help you mitigate or update designs and those kind of things that you've got going on in your environment. So one, you've got to show that's why this is a procedural requirement. You've got to show that you're actually out there actively pulling this information, researching these TTPs, and how attackers are trying to hit your environment. So it's all about a process and a procedure that you're doing as an organization. There's not necessarily any specific requirement here with .100 that tells you to go technically implement it. That comes in some of the later ones that we'll talk about, like with 101.